Have you ever wondered what it's like to die and then to come back to life again? Well, this happened to me a few years ago. Now, what actually happened on this particular day was I'd been down doing some gardening, and when I'd finished doing what I wanted to do, I bought a load of rubbish up from the garden to put it into the rubbish bag. Now, to get from where the garden was up to the top where the rubbish bag was, it was about 20 steps. There was about 3 or 4 sets of steps, but there was about 20 all in all. And I got up to the top and that was fine. I put the rubbish into the bin and suddenly developed a bit of a pain under just in the top of my stomach. And I thought, oh, that doesn't feel very good. So I just walked over to the garage and just sat down on I think it was a bag of fertiliser or something that was there, and I just sat there for a few minutes and just until the pain disappeared, which it did. So I wandered off back down to the garden again just to pick up the last few tools that I had down there. Come back up the top, put the tools into the garage, and the stomach pain started again. And it was just sort of underneath, my bust, just at the top of my stomach there. And I thought, oh God, that's annoying. So I went and sat back down on this bag, and the pain wouldn't go away. And I thought, oh, that's a bit annoying. So I walked inside and I just thought, if I lie down on the bed for a minute, it might go away. So went into the room, lay down on the bed, and sort of thought, oh, it's still not going away. It's really a bit annoying. And then by this time I thought, oh gosh, I needed to go to the toilet. So I did, went into the toilet and had a good sort of clean out and come back and lay back down on the bed, and the pain was still there, and it felt sort of like a digestive or gastric type of thing. So, but I just didn't feel right. I can't explain it. I just didn't feel right. So I rang my daughter who was downstairs and I said to her, can you come up here for a minute? I just want to talk to you about something. So she came up and I said, I'm in the bedroom. And she came in and my mum was here, but I didn't want to say anything to her. And I was in the bedroom. By the time my daughter came up, I'd broken out into a sweat and the pain was getting quite a bit worse. And I said, I think I'm having a heart attack. And she said, why? I told her, what had happened. And I says, can you ring the ambulance and see if they'll come? So she got on the phone, rang the ambulance, and she told them, and they said, have you got any aspirin in the house? Take a couple of aspirin, that's the first thing you need to do, and we'll have the ambulance there as soon as possible. Anyway, I sort of lay there and she stayed there with me. And anyway, the ambulance arrived in due course and came in, and he sort of had a look and they sort of poked around a wee bit, and he said, oh no, can't sort of see too much. He said, you've obviously got a bit of a gastric something going on there. So he said, just to play it safe, we'll take you into the hospital and get them to check you out. And I said, oh, okay then. So I walked out to the ambulance, it was on the road, and got up into the back of the ambulance, and I was sitting there on the gurney, but the pain was still really quite annoying. And anyway, strapped me in, driving off to the hospital, and I'm looking out the window wondering where we're going. And there's several routes to the hospital here on the North Shore, and 2 of them are sort of a bit more direct, but they're quite heavy trafficked. And there's another one that's not quite as direct. It's a wee bit further, but there's not so much traffic. And we were driving along, and I looked out the window and I thought, oh, I wonder what they've come this way for. And I knew where we were, but I wonder what they're coming this way for. And that's it. I don't remember a thing after that. And next thing, when I came to, I can recall being taken out of the ambulance on the gurney because it was jiggling, and there was people milling all around me talking, and someone saying, are you awake? You awake? Can you tell us what your name is, please? And I'm thinking, what on earth? What's going on here? You sort of think everyone's going a bit. But they kept insisting on me trying to ask me what my name was. So I told them what my name was and got into a bit of a room, and then I suddenly realised that half my clothes were missing. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? Anyway, they got me into the room, little emergency room there, and they're sort of starting to. There's nurses and there's doctors, and I thought, oh, what's happening here? And the doctor said, we sort of lost you on the way into the hospital. And I says, what do you mean you lost me? They said, well, your heart stopped beating and we're now having to try and stabilise things. And I thought they were all a bit nutty. But anyway, what had actually happened, as we'd sort of gone round this corner, apparently for some reason I just went out and vomited everywhere, much to the ambulance driver's disgust. And they managed to do CPR or whatever they needed, but they had to shock me twice with the defibrillator. And after the second shock, I came back round again, and that was just under 2 minutes apparently. And that was just as not long before I'd arrived at the hospital. And nothing. I've got no memory of that at all. Nothing at all. And got into the hospital, and of course they're sort of looking at me and trying to settle my, or whatever they do in there. And because it was a Saturday afternoon, the hospital where they took me, which is the main hospital on the North Shore of Auckland, they don't do cardiac on the weekend. So what they had to do was stabilise me, then put me in an ambulance and get me across the bridge to the Auckland hospital. And there was a nurse, and I think there was a doctor, and the ambo guys were there all the trip across the bridge. And I'm just sort of lying there, and they're saying, it's not far now, only got 2 minutes to go and we'll be there. And I'm thinking, what's all the panic? What's all the panic? I had no idea. Anyway, they get me into the Auckland hospital. They did an angiogram and found that I had 100% blockage in one of my arteries at the top of my heart. They found that there were other partial blockages, which they didn't attend to, but they did the 100% one. So then they had to give me an angioplasty, which is putting something into my arm and the cameras, and they put a stent in to open up the closed off artery in my heart. And I can remember this all going on, just lying there. I felt sort of like a lump of meat. There's people trying to get me to drink stuff, which I kept chucking up, and then they had to keep injecting me with stuff, and I got one doctor working over here, and I'm just thinking, what's all this carry on about? I had no idea. Anyway, once I'd sort of got me the stent done, once the stent was done, then the pain stopped, which was really good. And then I was taken up into the cardiac emergency area where I stayed, I think for a couple of days I was in there. And they sort of had me wired up to everything and sundry, and to monitor that everything was all okay. And I can even remember the doctor saying, what do you recall when basically the lights went out? And I said, nothing. It just went, it was like I was asleep. There was nothing. I didn't see any bright lights. I didn't see anyone saying, come this way, come this way. Nothing. I said, just went blank. And I can't remember anything for that 2+ minutes that I was actually gone. And anyway, I ended up having to stay in hospital just for, I think, another couple of days. They transferred me back over to the North Shore, and I was in there for a couple of days, and then I was able to be let out of hospital. That was about the Wednesday, I think, and this happened on the Saturday beforehand. And I at the time, I know sort of the family were a bit, oh my God, Mum's had a heart attack. And I was sort of just so blasé about the whole thing. It was like, Later on, it sort of hit me that oh my God, I did have a heart attack. And following that, the actual, once I got released from, or discharged from the hospital, I had to go back into the hospital I had to go once a week. They have like an education session once a week in the afternoon, where you go in there and they have different surgeons will come in and they'll talk about different aspects of your heart and all this sort of stuff, just to give you a bit of an idea, what happened and all this sort of stuff. And it's a sort of a class, and then they give you an exercise session for about half an hour. And the worst thing, of course, was that I wasn't able to drive. If you have a heart attack but you don't actually lose consciousness, I think they put about a 2-week suspension on your driving. But if you actually go out altogether, which I did, I had 3 months before I was allowed to get behind the wheel of a car again. And so that's how I got introduced to public transport. I would have to go up the street, get on the bus, go to the hospital, do my session, get the bus home again, and I had to do that for, I think it was about the 6 weeks that I had to go and do these sessions every week. And of course for 3 months I wasn't able to drive. Fortunately, I had my daughter here. As far as going to the supermarket and everything, she was able to drive and all that sort of stuff. But it was quite an experience. It was something that 13 years later, I guess I've become a little bit blasé about it. I mean, I haven't smoked for years and years and years. I used to, but I haven't smoked for years. I have a little bit of alcohol, maybe once or twice a week I might have a wine or something like that. Unfortunately, I don't maintain a healthy weight, which I'm trying desperately to get that off. And of course there are medications now that I have to be on for the rest of my life. I'm on statins, and I've got other ones that help me to avoid stress. I've got blood pressure medications. But the other thing is too, I used to be quite a prolific blood donor, and now I am excluded from giving blood for the rest of my life. If ever there's a blood drive, I can't do it. I'm not allowed to. So there has been ongoing things since that time, but basically I've just got up, carried on with my life, and just, that's it. I didn't let it get to me as being, oh my God, I've had a heart attack, I've got to sort of curl up in a cotton ball now and just do nothing. I got back out to work, I went to the gym and did all sorts of things. But the thing that's made me think of this just recently is the fact that in other videos that I've done, I've mentioned that I've got a couple of knee replacements coming up at some stage in the future. I've had the x-rays, I'm just waiting now to get an appointment to go to the orthopaedic surgeon. And of course that's all in the public health system. The heart attack, everything, when I had the heart attack, when I was in hospital, everything at all, because we've got a public health system here, never cost me a penny. The only thing that it did cost me is because the ambulance here is privately owned, even though it's subsidised. It's at St John's, I think it's called. There is a partial payment that you have to make for the ambulance, unless you're a member of the St John's organisation, which I'm not. So that was the only thing I had to pay for. I think that was about $60 or $70 for the ambulance, just the one from here to the hospital, not the ones that transferred me backwards and forwards between hospitals. But that never cost me anything. Never cost me a penny. The public transport did when I had to start going over there, but that was not much. So now that I've got this knee surgery coming up in the near future, it suddenly made me very aware of the fact that I have had a heart attack in the past. So I have to say I'm not looking forward to going and having an anaesthetic. I guess that's probably part of the reason why I've put this off for so long. But what it's made me realise is that because I've had that heart attack and I'm going in to have some surgery hopefully before the end of the year or early next year, I'm not quite sure. Public hospital, you've got to wait a wee bit. It's not, you can't get it straight away. And from what I understand, I was talking to a lady today that said to me that apparently if you're under 65 and working, they get you on the list quicker so they can get you back to work again. So if you're over 65 and retired, you get pushed down the list as not really urgent. But yeah, just got to bear with that, I guess. So what it's made me think about was having to start getting things in order. Now, I know that sounds a bit weird, but it's what it's made me start thinking about. I went and had a look at my will, which I'd made out in 2005. It is so far out of date now because it includes my mum who passed away 9 years ago. It's so far out of date, I thought, my God, I'd better get my will up to date. There are other things that I need to do about getting myself organised so that my kids know where everything is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to launch in on a program of sorting out all my affairs to make sure everything is in place so that when I go into hospital for the surgery, if anything happens at all, I've got everything taken care of. I've not thought about it I had the heart attack in 2012. So, and I think at that stage I was 61, I think. Yeah, 61. And it's made me think now that I've got to start getting stuff sorted out. I've carried on with my life quite merrily, doing everything that I want to when I want to, but now it's made me think I've got to get things sorted out. Funny thing is, I'm not at all afraid of death, having been there once before, even if it was only just a quick visit for 2 minutes and I didn't even see the door and come back again. But that doesn't concern me. What concerns me is making sure that I've got everything in place. So that's something I'm going to be starting on over the next. I've got a couple of plans, but I'm going to start working on that. Once I've got that all done, I'll do another video on the process that I went through to get my affairs all sorted out prior to going in and having this surgery. So that was just a recap for myself on my heart attack that I had and why it's brought me to the situation that I am at now, having to rethink my affairs, where everything's at with the pending surgery that I've got coming up in the future. So that's just that little bit of a talk. If you've got anything out of this at all, you can actually subscribe to my channel, which would be nice, or leave a like or a comment or a share. And I just wish everybody a happy week. Stay safe, take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Okay then, bye.